Hi. Not all of us can do great things, but we can do small things with great love. This observation by Mother Teresa applies so well on our guest today, Gabriel Constance, Ph.D. Good morning, friends. Today we have with us a person who is a healer to many in distress and visits certain institutions to provide succor and positivity. It's a great pleasure for Setu to host Dr. Gabriel Constance, the USA based counselor, educator, writer, editor, for the sixth episode of the limited series of literary and critical conversations. He is a well known name with a significant social media presence. However, the occasion demands a formal introduction. Here it goes. Gabriel Constance has written for numerous newspapers, magazines, websites, radio, and literary journals in North America, Europe, Oceania, Africa, the Middle East, and Asia, and is a contributing writer along with Maya Angelou to You the Writer by Gutenrico of Houghton Mifflin Company, The Real Meaning of Life by David Seaman of New World Library, and From Eology to Joy, Cynthia Kuhn Weichel. Gabriel's books include over a dozen works of fiction and nonfiction by a variety of publishers. The Last Conception, a novel, Buddha's Wife, a novel, Don't Just Sit There, Do Something, Grief's Wake Up Call, St. Catherine's Baby are short stories. These are a few of his most recent titles. Buddha's Wife has been adapted into a contemporary screenplay for film and presently seeking a producer. He has edited and collaborated on numerous manuscripts and writing projects, including Village Wisdom by Lê Lee Hayslip, a Vietnamese American writer. A Woman of Heart by Marcy Allen Craig of Mezzo Publishers, and many more. His book reviews at the New York Journal of Books are thoughtful, entertaining, and informative. Dr. Constance has served the community since 1974 as a grief counselor, chaplain, social worker, and massage therapist, and is certified in thought field therapy. His private counseling and consulting practice is located in Santa Cruz, California. He was a mental health consultant at Santa Cruz Integrative Medicine and Chi Center. Gabriel worked at the Center for Grief and Loss at Hospice of Santa Cruz County as a social worker, educator, and bereavement counselor since its founding in 1977. Additional experience includes work as a program manager for an innovative mental health center, impact and dharma programs at California state prisons, and as a drug and alcohol counselor for teens and ex-convicts. His doctorate in death education is from the Union Institute and University, and Masters in Pastoral Counseling from Beacon College, and his Bachelor of Science in Human Relations and Organizational Behavior is from the University of San Francisco. Gabriel lives in San Francisco Bay Area, is married, and is the co-parent to 5 children. He has 4 grandchildren in the States and an extended family at the ROP Center for Street Children in Rwanda, along with the Tangane Project for Women and Rural Healthcare in Rwanda. On behalf of Setu, I extend a warm welcome to Dr. Gabriel Constance. Welcome to the 6th edition of the limited series of literary and critical conversations, Gabriel.
Welcome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the invitation to be with you this morning, and I've been looking forward to it for some time. You always highlight very inspirational people and very creative guests you've had on, which I've really enjoyed the other shows.
We are honored today to have you. Well, let's commence the dialogue. Please tell us something about your childhood, upbringing, and early influences.
I was brought up in a small lumber town in Northern California. My father went to work at the lumber yard every day for 40 years, early in the morning. Also fought forest fires in the summer. My mom was a bookkeeper, and they divorced when I was 12, and she remarried a couple of years later after that. The people that were most influenced me probably during my growing up years was Professor Jane Carr, who was my martial arts instructor. An amazing, amazing woman. She actually just got her 10th degree black belt. She's the highest level belt in North America. And she still is practicing and teaching jiu-jitsu and judo and she's 80 years old and she's still teaching it. So she was a big influence in my younger life. And then also some books I read when I was 16 influenced me greatly. One was by Paramahansa Yogananda, Autobiography of a Yogi. Another was by Baba Ram Das, called Be Here Now. And third one was by Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, which was about Zen meditation. So those are all my biggest influences, as well as Joan Baez, who I think I fell in love with when I was 16. She was a social activist as well as an amazing singer too.
Yeah, meditation is something very interesting for me. Maybe some other time I will talk to you about that and know more how to practice it. You have almost about 50 years of experience of being a mental health counselor. How do the twin roles go together of a mental health counselor and writer?
They really are very much connected. When I was 16, I started going to a program for my own mental health and with different issues that were going on. And it was a drop-in center for people for teenagers that are dealing with all different kinds of problems and issues. And after going there for a year, I started doing counseling there as well. with other peers my age. And that was when I started. And it also happened to be the same time I started meditation at the Shasta Abbey, which is a Zen monastery north of where I lived. And all those being with people in a variety of situations, understanding how much we are alike, and yet how unique we each are as well, greatly influenced all my writing, especially my nonfiction that I first started out as writing as a journalist and then as a nonfiction writer of books and magazine and newspaper articles. But it also influenced my fiction writing later on as well, since I incorporated a lot of what I have observed and felt and experienced into stories I've written.
Okay. Counseling is a noble profession, giving hope to people when they are down and out, or reforming delinquents and drug addicts is really so much a great help. Today morning itself, I just came across a saying that said that finding a good therapist is more difficult than finding love on Tinder. So I just remembered you that you are actually a good therapist and helping so many people.
Mm.
Any memorable incident of your chosen field, that is mental health counselor?
Oh, I don't know if there's any one specific
Mm-hmm.
time. There's a lot of very intense, difficult, inspiring
Mm-hmm.
moments. But I think the thing that I recall the most is the times when I've been able to, so that I could be a good counselor or a therapist or somebody sitting with people, or standing at times, is when I'm able to pay attention to what's going on with myself in the moment
Mm-hmm.
in order to let go of that and be completely present with you or whoever I'm with at the moment. Because at that time, I realized that person's journey is not my own. What they're experiencing is not what I'm experiencing, though we may have, but at the same time, we have this similar human connection that we all experience suffering and we all want the same things out of our lives, essentially. So whenever that happens, then it's always reinvigorates me and re-inspires me
Mm-hmm.
to continue because I keep learning as I do that.
Mm-hmm. Tell us something about your visits to the prisons, your interactions there.
I went with two other people to state prisons in California, about three different ones over about 10 years. And once a week, we would go, and these are the maximum security state prisons, really large prisons where most people are for quite some time, or at least for a couple of years. And we would hold uh, insight meditation class for anybody who wanted to come to it. And again, the experience was one of the things I think one of the things that stood out for me the most was that many of us don't know how to pause and take a look at what's going on, especially in a really heightened situation.
Mm-hmm.
So many times that we've never learned how to do that, that then we react, especially when we're younger, and then do something that hurts other people, or hurts ourselves, or gets us imprisoned. And there was one exercise we did where we asked each person to tell us how many minutes it took for them to commit the act that they were convicted of how they ended up in prison. And one person would say 10 minutes, another person said 2 minutes, I just didn't think. A couple people said 15 minutes. When you added up all the minutes of 10 people in the room, it was an hour to an hour and a half. And then we have each of them say how many years they were sentenced for that 5-10 minutes. And some were for 2 years, some 5 years, some for life. And then we added up all those hours. And it just said that in these people's lives, that it could happen to anybody. But if we aren't able to pay attention to ourselves and how we're reacting and have some way to pause, many times we take out our anger or frustration and we just react and respond. And it ended up like an hour of time for like 100 years of all these people total together could be in jail. And it just reminded me, and always reminds me when we do that exercise, of how just a few moments can change somebody's entire life. To really wonderful things or to really painful things.
So on an impulse, people, they just do something wrong and maybe later they repent over it. It's quite an experience to talk to such people and find out, to elicit all that they have in their hearts and minds. Quite an art that you have been doing. And these are the prohibited black holes of the society where you visit. You have been in the role of a healer, grief counselor, chaplain. What valuable lessons have you learned from your visits to hospices?
Well, I worked in a hospice for many years, and when I did grief counseling there, people would come to there, but mostly we would go to people's homes and connect with them in their home and help them to stay at home for their last weeks, months, or days. So it was went to a lot of people's homes. But the thing that I learned, I think the one reason that I continued doing it for so long, because not everybody is able to do that. I realized that. And at first I'd say, oh, anybody can do it. You just care about people. But then I really realized that it's not something everybody can do. And you don't have to. But for me, the thing that it always reminded me of how that this is it.
Sorry?
That this is it. Right now, this is today. Today is our day. Today, this moment. We always think, yeah, I know, we understand intellectually we're going to die, or somebody we care about is going to die someday. But it never really hits us until it happens, usually. But it reminded me to live as fully as I can and be engaged with life and appreciate our life more than I think it would have if I didn't do that kind of work.
Yeah. So the condition of healthcare center also is not too good. That also needs to be reformed. Governments are waking up. Even in North America, the health sector is not very good, despite being the first world. Yeah. So let's see how they speed up things and improve.
Yeah.
How do people in most vulnerable situations deal with stress and grief? How can grief be processed in a creative way? Can you tell us?
Um, there are, well, first, let me say, there is no right way. There is no perfect way. There is no, I wish if there were steps somebody could take, I wish I could say do 1, 2, and 3, and everything will be okay.
Mhm.
But there isn't. So everybody's unique and everybody reacts so differently based on uh, culture, based on family, based
Mhm.
on what you've learned with your community,
Correct.
based on your own personality,
Mhm.
um, what based on experiences that have happened to you before in your life. So there's so many factors that affects each individual of how we react to stress or anxiety or grief or loss. The couple things that seem to help most everybody, however, even though they may sound simple, but if you do them every day,
Mhm.
tend to relieve it, at least some of those symptoms, and make it not as intense or not as long. And those are one which in many cultures they've been doing for years, but in the West only more recently. And that is taking a few moments every single day, if it's about if it's grief over somebody who's died, is taking 5, 10 minutes every day in a place that feels safe to you and just be with that person who has died.
Mhm.
And whatever that means to you, look at pictures, talk to them out loud, look at um, cry about them, be angry at them because they were a jerk and you never got a chance to change that. It's not all good and it's not all bad, but acknowledging during that time everything that you feel or think about that person during that time and releasing it somehow, writing it down. Some people prefer to write what they're feeling or thinking in a
Mhm.
journal, etc. Some people just yell, go by the ocean and start yelling at thing or etc. The two other things that tend to help a lot is exercise. Any kind
Mhm.
of exercise you can do, physical exercise, because it affects our emotional and mental state as well,
Correct.
um, by doing some kind of exercise. And getting enough sleep
Mhm.
and drinking enough water. Drinking enough water every single day. When you get dehydrated, it tends to affect the body and et cetera, et cetera. So those things I have found more than anything else seem to be the most helpful. It can also be really good to go talk to somebody or have a good friend or a mentor
Mhm.
or if you belong to some religious organizations, there's somebody in there you feel connected to that you can talking to them or um, or a counselor or a priest or rabbi or
Mhm.
minister or meditation teacher
Mhm.
or just a really good friend who you know will be really honest with you and also be really support you and really cares about you and just being able to talk to them. One other thing that some people are able to do, not everybody can. Some people who I have found that interviewed for the book Beyond One's Own don't just sit there, a grief wake up call. Um,
Mhm.
some people find that the only way they can get through a traumatic loss is to do something to try to help others get the result of that's similar to what happened to their loved one.
Mhm.
And for example, a couple I spoke with, the Greens, and their son was murdered in Italy, their young son, when they were driving. It was by accident.
Mhm.
Well, not by accident, but they were being robbed by some people and they shot at the car and didn't know their son was asleep in the back and it killed him. And what they did almost right away is they donated their young son's organs
Okay.
for other people to have life. And it ended up going to about 6 or 7 people. And then they publicized what they had done in Italy. And in Italy, culturally, it was really taboo to donate organs to somebody else. But because of this family coming out and saying what they'd done for their son and showing why, that they wanted to be able to help other people, that, you know, they're lost. They didn't want it just to be them about that. And other people have done other things, changing laws. Another woman changed the laws in the US about drunk driving and started Mothers Against Drunk Driving after her daughter was killed by a drunk driver, Candace Lightner. And that's what got her through. She was so angry she couldn't grieve or think for 3 or 4 years. And she started funneling that energy into changing the laws. Because it used to be that people drunk driving would just go in jail for a day and get let out and be able to drive again. So her actions ended up changing the culture of drunk driving across the entire country. And it changed all the laws too. So, but not everybody's able to do those type of things. But that is something else. Even if it's just a little thing, going and planting trees in your community for someone who you care about who passed, that can make a difference too.
But creativity does help a great deal in venting out your loss and pain. It really helps. Well, these are tragic incidents which you just talked about. Do you want to read out an excerpt now?
Sure. Actually, it's sort of.
Is it from a nonfiction?
Yeah, this is from nonfiction, and it connects really with what I was just talking about quite a bit. It's from, I used to do a weekly column for our local newspaper called Good Grief. And each week I would share an experience of, without giving any names or anything, of somebody who came to see me and what kind of loss they'd experienced, and then what they found that helped them through it. And I ended up putting all these different grief stories into a book called Good Grief, Love, Loss, and Laughter. And this is just from the beginning, it's sort of an introduction, but it's fairly brief. It says, what is normal? Sometimes people ask right away, is this normal? Others take their time until they feel safe enough and then ask essentially the same question. Am I going crazy? Do other people ever feel this? Will I be okay? What they're referring to is the intense, overwhelming, and often bewildering experience of the bereaved. The physical and mental reactions of shock, numbness, shortness of breath, racing heart, stomach upset, difficulty sleeping or eating, lethargy, exhaustion, forgetfulness, inability to focus, clumsiness, and confusion can all be part of the journey of loss. They aren't always, but can be. The emotional swings in mood from intense vigilance and anxiety to extreme pain, nonstop tears and sadness are the body's natural responses to the death of a loved one. Though grief and mourning are our body's natural reaction to separation, they can also resemble and mask symptoms of anxiety and depression. If after a period of time you're unable to function in daily life or are in doubt, do not hesitate to seek help, information, and support. More than likely, whatever you are experiencing is to be expected, and there would be far more concern if you were not reacting at all. Having someone we love torn from our physical presence, or the thought of such a thing happening, can bring the strongest person in the world to their knees. Feeling the full impact of loss, in some respects, seems to be the initiation fee we pay to be part of the human race.
That's a wonderful one.
Mm.
Thank you so much for reading it.
Pleasure.
Well, you have attempted all literary genres, creating novels, non-fiction, short stories, plays, and screenplays. How do you feel about this genre hopping?
Well, I like rabbits, and so I really like to hop um, from one thing to another. Um, I don't know. I think it was it's sort of a challenge
Mm,
because I like to learn how to write in different genres, and some are more difficult than others. Um, I never thought of writing fiction when I began because I was mostly doing all nonfiction and interviews with people and more journalistic kinds of pieces and books about grief, loss, and death and dying and mental health. And so that's mostly what I was focused on when I first began writing. And then I started, actually, the first fictional story was a brief story for young people, which is based on a true story. Our oldest daughter volunteered
mm,
with a woman who had a single parent woman who had AIDS and had two children, and she
mhm,
was dying. And this was at a time before
mhm,
there were any drugs that were helpful to that people could live a full life if they could just continue taking the antivirals. And so this woman died,
mm,
and our daughter would go and help with would take care of the children while the nurse would be with the mother and stuff every week. And she talked to me about that experience. And so I wrote a brief fictional story
oh,
about her and
mm,
changed all the names.
mm,
And that's the first book about fiction I wrote. It's called Just a Heartbeat Away.
mhm,
And then I started realizing that I could bring that in similar kinds of things into other stories, as well as things about meditation, spiritual aspects, and things that have always been important to me. So then I started writing short stories and trying to get them into, and I realized that it's really difficult to write a really good short story with a good beginning, a middle, and an end within a certain amount of time that tells an entire story and really captures somebody's attention and is also different in
mm,
some ways. So I kept practicing that for a number of years, got better and better. And then I did my first novel, which was a romance, which is actually based on a nurse at hospice's true life of marrying one brother and then ending up and marrying the other one later on in life. Um, and then I started writing more and more. And then I actually a friend in Sweden, I was visiting them there on our honeymoon 35 years ago,
oh,
and he was reading a book called Magdalene, all about Mary Magdalene.
mhm,
Um, it was a fictional book, and it was based partly on historical, but mostly is fictional. That there are a number of people that believe that Jesus of Nazareth was actually married to Mary, and instead of like they changed it in when they put together in the Bible. Um, so this book is as if they were married, which most time Jewish rabbis at that time were married, and would then go to town talking to people and preaching.
mhm,
So more than likely, but whether you believe that or not, he asked me, I said, "Oh, what's that you're reading?" He asked me, he said, "Wasn't Siddhartha the Buddha, wasn't he married?" And and I said, "I think he was. Yeah, I think so. But most people don't know anything about her."
mhm,
And so at that time, it was before the internet. And so I went to all the biggest libraries I could find to find whatever I could about his wife, Yashodhara. Um, and I only found two sentences about her anywhere.
mhm.
So I decided to write a book called Buddha's Wife,
Okay.
based on what historical things I could find Buddha and things that him and disciples and his family and her family actually did or didn't do. And that was the first major fictional story I told. I couldn't say it was historical fiction because not everything I have in it is historically accurate. So it was just fictional. And then when I started to, and it was all on life from her perspective and how angry she was when he left in the middle of the night without telling her or their newborn son who'd just been born where he was going and disappearing for 7 years before they ever saw him again as the Buddha. So then I started, eventually somebody said, you should make that a screenplay. And I'd never written a screenplay. So I said, well, I'll try that. That should be easy.
Mm-hmm.
And it was not. It was very, very difficult.
The most challenging, yes.
That was about 12 years ago. And since then, I've written quite a few screenplays and had 2 produced. And most recent one, and we have another one that's probably going to go into production in September. And I keep getting better at it. But it's, you know.
Do you have to take a course for that?
No, and no, most people don't take courses. They just think like I did, think, oh yeah, I can write a screenplay. But I just kept writing and getting feedback from people and practicing because, as you're probably well aware, people always talk about when you write fictional story, show, don't tell. You know, don't talk about what is happening in the story. Have the person in the story say what they're, you know, have a conversation or show what's happening. You know, they reacted a certain way or their environment, etc. And in books, you can still include what somebody's thinking sometimes. And even with novels, it's difficult sometimes to show and not just talk too much. In screenplays, it's 10 times more difficult to do that because you have even less time. You're having to try to fit this entire story and book into 90 minutes, 120 minutes at the most, usually. And unless it's an Indian movie, then it can go on 2.5 to 3 hours. So, but most of the time it's like 90 minutes to an hour to a 2 hour long movie. And so that's what I keep learning how to do, through the conversation, through the scene, through what's happening, show and not tell.
So I think you look for more challenges in life, and that has helped you and encouraged you into genre hopping.
Yes.
Yeah, you always look for challenges. Yes, what next? So you look for that. And one needs to be super talented as you to handle different genres at the same time. You have handled all of them with Elan.
I think talent wise, I'm okay. I'm not that talented. And perhaps because I've written so much now, I've gotten better at it. And learned and not just wrote whatever I wanted to write and said, well, if you don't like it, then you just don't understand, kind of thing. So being willing to take feedback and improving it, I think I've gotten better. So some of it may be talent, but I think for many people, and some people are just amazingly able to write incredible things. And it's just innately part of their nature. I'm not like that. I have to keep practicing and keep doing it.
Okay, great. So what's your fundamental view of life, of humanity?
I am a realistic optimist. I see that there is great suffering in life and that there's also great joy. And I tend to always be hopeful and focused on what's next, or how can I change it or improve it or make something better, including myself, and not as well as society, and whatever I can do to help those things, the systems or government or agencies or some program, how to have those things better serve people, or things in my family or people of my family, what I can do, because there's always something going on with somebody. And there are times I would say I don't know. So a lot of people think that there's always meaning behind everything. I think we can choose to give meaning to everything that happens, but sometimes I think things just are what they are, and there's no meaning one way or the other. It's just how do you say it? It's some kind of controlled chaos. Mm-hmm. It's like there's karma, mm-hmm. But karma, so whatever goes out comes back, and there's so many people and so many things that it gets all so mixed up. There's no way to know for sure what is yours and what is somebody else's. So I guess that's the closest I can come to. I really believe in love more than anything. So
even if the story is not yours, at least your point of view creeps in. So subjectivity does creep in.
yes.
Yes. So however hard you try to, keep yourself away.
That's true. And that's
but sometimes to a lesser extent, sometimes to a greater extent, it does creep in.
it does. And that's why it seems so important to not assume what somebody else is experiencing just because of what they look like or how they act, or what they've done or not done, and just ask, find, discover, be curious, care about that person instead of putting our own subjectivity or our own experience and assuming that they are feeling or behaving or thinking a certain way. And I think the best we can do is really ask and listen.
Writing for TV and film would have been very challenging for you, right? Your views, can we know?
Challenging my views.
Writing for TV and film?
It can be, although it's what's challenging about it is trying to get something produced. Other than that's the most difficult to get your screenplay looked at for TV or somewhere else, and then being patient and being persistent about continuing to contact people and continuing to get it out there, and not taking no personally. And those things I've gotten better again and learned how to do it over the years. I think that's the most difficult part. But as far as subject matter or issues or whatever I want to write about, that's pretty open for teleplays and screenplays because there's so many different services and places you can have it picked up at.
Share your thoughts on your recent multicultural film.
The Last Conception, I feel very, very humbled by it and very proud of it. It was pretty amazing to be able to take this story based on my book, which interestingly enough is in some ways a continuation of the story Buddha's Wife, except with a modern Indian American family in the States when they discover, when their daughter discovers, and they tell her that she's the last in line of an ancient spiritual tradition that's been around for over 2,500 years. And she has to have a baby, whether she's married or not, to continue it. So I found wonderful producers with the Poison Pictures. They really understood the script, the screenplay I wrote. They made really great changes to it. In the book, it's more of a drama and romance, I would say. And in the film, they made it more into a romantic comedy, more of a family romantic comedy, because it's really all about this family and their gay daughter and her girlfriend and her sister and um, and the parents and the grandparents who come, her grandmother who comes to visit. And they just did so good at casting the film. It just, every actor was perfect for the part. And the changes they made were wonderful. And then we've been able to get it distributed to, on some platform or outlet or channel, almost every country in the world now.
Okay.
And that's taken about 2 years to do that.
Great.
Yeah. So I'm really, it's always wonderful to hear people from all different places talk about how the film touched them, either it made them laugh or made them think about things or said it was just like their family, or that's always nice to hear those kinds of things.
We wish you good luck for its wider reception. Hope it becomes a popular choice among global viewers.
Thank you. I hope so too.
What is the mantra of leading a life that is full of meaning and mindfulness? What should be done to achieve overall wellness and well-being in this post-pandemic stressful world?
Very similar to what we were talking about earlier, as far as of how to live with grief. I'd say not much different. It's really a lot of the same things. Find ways to interact socially with other people.
Yeah.
Other people that you know are safe, that you know care about you, whether that's one person or 50 people. Practice some kind of self-reflection, whether that's prayer, meditation, mantras, visualization, yoga, whatever it is. Do some kind of exercise, which is really important during the pandemic. I know many people cannot get out much, and still very important. Whatever kind of exercise you can do.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would, and again, if you're feeling intense anxiety repeatedly, consistently over a period of time, and or depression, so that it's difficult for you to function, get some help. It's just like any other part of your body. It's your physical health. They say mental health, but it's your physical health, and your brain is just one part of your body. So there's nothing to be ashamed about getting help, seeing a counselor, seeing a therapist. Sometimes medication is helpful. Sometimes other things are helpful. But you don't have to be alone. Probably over a third of the to half of the people in pretty much every country experience to some degree intense anxiety and depression at some point in their life. To some people, it lasts longer and is more difficult to get out of than others.
Well, any particular tips in the end for the young artists, Gabriel?
Yes, first I would say be able to not take yourself too seriously when you're writing and think that you are the next Chitra Diva Karuni or Isabel Allende or James Baldwin or Toni Morrison, or that you're the next most famous writer in the world and everybody should read whatever you write. Instead, be really clear about why it is that you want to write, why it is that you're writing. Do you want to keep a journal? Do you want to write just to self-reflect and keep a tap of what's happened in your life and look back on it later? Journaling can be a really good way to actually to get out of yourself as well. To have some perspective, objectivity on what you've been going through. So it can be really helpful just in and of itself. Or are you writing to try to learn how to write better? Or are you writing because you want other people to give you validation? Are you writing because you think it's really wonderful and interesting to see what you can create and see what creative story you can come up with? And or see other people connect with it or not? Are you writing because you want to make money from what you're writing, which is very few people, by the way, but or because you want to be really well known? It's okay to want to write for that reason, but whatever your reason is, I think it's important to realize and understand your intention of why you are. And then the other thing is just to be persistent and stay with it.
Yes.
And don't give up after your stories have been rejected at first, or don't stop writing. If you really want to write, if it's really important to you, then keep on writing until it gets better or until you feel better about what you've written, whether it gets published or not.
Yours has been a truly remarkable journey, lending help to the distressed and the distraught in various capacities must have earned you a lot of blessings. Indeed, it was enlightening listening to you, Gabriel, today. So friends, let's learn to return to the community the same way we take from it. A big thanks to you, Gabriel, for accepting our invitation. Thanks, Gabriel, again. Thanks, viewers. In the next episode, we will present to you another important guest. Till then, bye-bye.